Um, thank you. Um, Thank you for coming this evening to Climate Change in the Americas. We appreciate you making time to be here tonight and joining us here on Zoom. As you probably just heard, we will be recording this just because we had a few people who couldn't make it tonight and requested that. We'll also share that link out with everyone participating tonight. So you have that available for yourselves as well. So we are going to jump right in because we have three wonderful presentations to get through tonight, as well as a panel discussion. So our first presenter is Katie Van Dusen of CORCLIMA in Monteverde, Costa Rica. The Monteverde Commission for Resilience to Climate Change works to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, capture much more carbon than they emit, and adapt as fast as possible and serve as an example for the rest of the world. CORCLIMA promotes Costa Rica's national energy strategy for climate change by monitoring changes, facilitating action, motivating people, and mobilizing resources. So welcome, Katie. We look forward to hearing from you.
Good evening, everyone. I'll just pull up my presentation, and it's wonderful to be connecting with you this evening. Thank you, Laura, for that introduction. I'm Quaker, and I came to Costa Rica because there is a Quaker community in Costa Rica called Monteverde that's up on the Continental Divide in the cloud forest. And the reason that there is a Quaker community here, is because during in the time between the Korean War and World War II and the Korean War, the U.S. passed the first peacetime draft. And Quakers are one of the peace churches in the States. And at the same time, Costa Rica abolished its army. So when the judge told 5 conscientious objectors who refused to sign up for the draft that they better find a different country if they didn't like the laws of the United States, they decided to move to Costa Rica. And this pursuit of always trying to do the right thing is part of what led me to try to do the right thing in response to climate change. Laura shared our mission, which is to unite Monteverde, the whole region, to lower emissions, which is really trying to reduce the pollution causing global warming, capture carbon with our soils and our forests, and adapt to climate change as fast as possible, mostly finding a way for all living beings to thrive in the midst of the climate crisis. CORCLIMA is a special commission of our municipality, so it's governmental, but we also have a foot in the Monteverde Community Fund. So we are a public-private entity. And we really are more than just a commission. We are a movement. We are a network of leaders. We are a signatory to the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, one of 12,000 or more municipalities. And we're one of the cantons that are part of the national program for carbon neutrality in Costa Rica. And we very much try to be a model for other municipalities and other places. We follow the National Strategy for Climate Change, which supports mitigation and adaptation. Two jargony words, mitigation being lowering that pollution, and adaptation, making sure that all living beings thrive. And do that by measuring the changes, developing the practices and the capacity and the technology for people to do what it takes to mitigate and adapt, and to educate, and mostly to inspire and motivate people to act and generate the resources, mobilize the resources to make that happen. Just as in the rest of the world, much of what's happening with climate change in Monteverde is that the weather patterns are changing. We used to, when I first came here in 1980, had 25 dry days per year because we're in a cloud forest and we had gentle precipitation all year. And now we have an average of 115 days. So we've got many more drier days. But when it rains, it rains much more intensely, and we have landslides and roads and bridges wash out, and production of crops is much more challenging. We have developed an adaptation plan for the region, and it has 15 different programs and 57 different activities. I'm not going to go into all of them in 20 minutes. One thing that's really important to understand is that CORCLIMA and the municipality are not doing all this on their own. Again, it's uniting Monteverde and many different organizations, taking leadership on what they're good at. Some examples of adaptation activities or the programs are land use planning, recharging the aquifers, and protecting springs. Water conservation is extremely important given the longer dry seasons, and 28% of Costa Rica's potable water is flushed down toilets. And so one of the things that we're doing is prototyping toilets that do not use water, that are pleasant to use and economical to build, and where we can treat the biosolids so that they're safe. Managing stormwater, promoting a local circular economy that is zero waste. And one of the things and there's several other programs, but one of the things that goes across all the programs and that we have learned is that strong communities are more resilient communities, whether the crisis is climate change or a pandemic or whatever. So all of the activities that we promote try to nurture community. We also have a mitigation plan to reduce greenhouse gases. And that is very much based on measurement and our inventory of greenhouse gases, which we do every 3 years. If you see the orange section, that is ground transportation, what's coming out of people's tailpipes. 63% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from tailpipes. The second source of emissions is liquid petroleum gas, which is similar to propane, mostly for cooking. And the third is about 8% for livestock, the flatulence and the belching coming from cows, something that I think that Wisconsin can relate to. The fourth source is solid waste. And again, that is organic matter rotting without oxygen, followed by wastewater, stationary use of fossil fuels, refrigerants, and fertilizers. We also measure how much our forests and our soils are capturing. And when we subtract what we're capturing from what we're emitting, we still end up with a positive number. And when what we're really trying to do across the world is get that number down to zero so that we can be truly carbon neutral. But we're not there yet. So 63% of our emissions are coming from tailpipes. And because of that, we are promoting sustainable mobility. The top two are, I'm sorry, some of these are in Spanish, are promoting active mobility, pedestrians and people using bikes, then collective mobility. So we've got fewer vehicles and more people in each vehicle. And finally, that those vehicles that we have are electric. We build sidewalks, and we have tried to incorporate public art into those sidewalks. We promote biking in different ways, especially promoting safe biking and getting people to share the road and have safe practices when biking. We spent time doing a study asking people what their needs are in any kind of climate action. You want to be responding to people's needs. And we also asked the transportation providers what their needs are. And with that information and more, we did a feasibility study for 4 public bus routes and found out that they were not economically or legally feasible. So it's been a challenge. One of the things we've done is create a website so people can get information about what collective mobility options there are. In terms of electric mobility, we have established first the Ruta Eléctrica Monteverde and then Rutas Eléctricas Costa Rica, which is basically businesses providing electric charge to people with electric vehicles. In Costa Rica, 98% of our electricity is coming from green, non-fossil fuel sources. So driving an electric car in Monteverde is really very clean. And the idea is that rather than having just plugging in and sitting in your car, you can walk around the forest, sleep in a hotel, go to a restaurant, do shopping, that you're doing what you want to do. You're charging with a purpose. Sorry about that. And we have expanded this idea, and there are now 5 other communities in Costa Rica that also have rutas eléctricas. Only 1% of our emissions come from electricity because our grid is so green. And so we do provide information to people about how they can install solar. We've found that really people are much more interested in solar hot water heaters because they get a much faster return on their investment. And it's really a way to save electricity. We also have begun to promote the responsible lighting and the 5 principles of responsible lighting that is promoted by the Dark Sky Association, which is a global association, that light needs to be useful, warm colored, it needs to be directed, low levels and controlled. And a lot of it's not just good for saving electricity, but it's also great for our health and for the animals in our midst. 8% of our emissions come from liquid petroleum gas. And so we promote induction stoves. And if you have an induction stove and we were doing this in person, I would be giving you a sticker. Induction is fast, it's economical, it's precise, it's safe, it's clean. Half of our solid waste is coming from organics. We very much want everyone to separate out all of their waste so that we're moving towards zero waste. And we do have a big focus on organics. So the municipality is piloting a composting project, and about 26% of the organics now in the zone are composted by this program. But we also created a manual in both English and Spanish with about 20 different options for how you can compost at home. And you can find this on our website at CORCLIMA.org if you are interested in composting at home. We also are very much promoting a circular economy where we are trying to lengthen the life of products. And we have a bartering center, which is really responding to the needs, especially of women. 95% of the people who come and trade are women, and lengthening the life of stuff and reducing consumerism. And at the same time, much of what comes in is blue jeans, and we upcycle the blue jeans that aren't tradable into bags and hats for sale to help support the project. 2% of our emissions come from refrigerants. Refrigerants are probably the most potent greenhouse gases. They are between 1,000 and 12,000 times more potent than carbon dioxide. On our website, we have a video. There's not time to share it with you today, but I encourage you to go see it and hear what you can do about refrigerants and reducing that pollution. 2% of our emissions comes from fertilizers, mostly nitrogen fertilizers and nitrous oxide. And this fits directly with composting and a circular economy. Instead of using those fertilizers, use compost. 8% of our emissions come from livestock, mostly from cows. So we promote regenerative agriculture and regenerative livestock production. We are a dairy farming community in addition to being a tourist destination. It's important to note that it's really on the farms where we are capturing carbon and where we are with the soil and with the trees. How do they do this? There are two main things that these farmers are doing. One is that they're eliminating the agrochemicals so that the microbes and the insects in the soil can come back. This is a cow pie that has been worked on by a dung beetle who's been dragging the nutrients down into the soil. And the other thing is the rotation of pastures is lengthened out so that roots can go deeper. And that way they can exchange the carbon and fix more carbon. They're also reducing the amount of feed concentrate that they're giving the cows. Feed concentrate, it has a very, very high carbon footprint, and it's also very expensive. So by growing more feed on the farms, it's reducing costs and emissions. One of the most important actions that happens in Monteverde are the conservation organizations that are preserving and protecting forest. The forests are capturing carbon and holding carbon. They're absorbing water that is not just for people, but also for electricity and for irrigation. And we have maybe a tiny fraction of a percent of the land on the planet, but we have about 3% of the biodiversity. We also have been planting more and more native trees over the last 40 years. So it's not just in the reserves, it's outside as well. And it's extremely important anytime anybody says, oh, plant a tree and you'll be helping the world. It's not just planting the trees, it's protecting the trees. And for us, that's protecting them from cows and fire. So that's a summary of the action for reducing pollution. How do we get people to do that? The more that people actually do things and are examples for others, that's a huge thing. And if you go to our website, there's an infographic, several infographics, but here's one about how to inspire climate action. And one is to respond to people's needs, and another is to be an example for them. Another is to tell a really good story, because people remember stories. In Monteverde, there's great biodiversity. And many years ago, a girl came to Monteverde and saw the golden toad, which was only seen in Monteverde. And she came back in the early 90s with her daughters, excited to show her daughters the golden toad, to find out that it had not been seen in 5 years. And it was probably because of climate change. That woman was already working on environmental issues, but she, after that visit, went on to work in climate change. This is that woman. Her name is Cristiana Figueres, and she led the Paris Accord, which in 2015 brought 196 countries together with the UN to act on climate change. And she wrote a book with one of her colleagues called The Future We Choose, and it's got 10 actions. It's very readable. I very much recommend it. And one of the 10 actions is to be politically active. And so my call to action, I've got 2 of them. actually, everything that I've been talking about is not my most impactful and important climate action, I think. I think for me, getting out the vote in the United States and getting people to vote for candidates from the top down who are going to implement climate action is really what's most important. And so this November, I urge you to vote up and down the tickets for people who are going to act on climate change at this crucial time. And that means Kamala Harris. And because we know Donald Trump won't, and if we vote for somebody else, that might hurt Kamala Harris. So please vote for Kamala Harris. And the second thing I just want to mention is that we in Monteverde have just received a prize from the World Wildlife Fund from the Planet City Challenge for being in Costa Rica, being the winner on climate action. And they have another campaign, which also asks you to vote. And so we're one of about 64 cities that is doing these campaigns. And you can go to our social media, CORCLIMA.org, or you can go to welovecities.org Monteverde and vote for Monteverde, which will support us in being able to continue our climate action. And there is our website in there. And thank you very much. I hope I'm not over time. It's been nice to share this with you.
All right. Thank you so much, Katie, for sharing all that wonderful information about what's going on in Monteverde and all that CORCLIMA is doing. And I think we can all find inspiration from some of those actions that we can do at home, wherever we are too. So we are going to keep moving right along. We will continue with our next presentation. We will hear from Mirta Sosa Pacheco of the Loka Initiative, which is based in Madison, Wisconsin, but acts on a worldwide level. The Loka Initiative works at the intersection of faith and ecology. Loka is an education and outreach platform for faith leaders and religious institutions at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Their mission is to support faith-led environmental and climate efforts locally and around the world by helping build capacity of faith leaders and culture keepers of Indigenous traditions, and by creating new opportunities for projects, partnerships, and public outreach. So welcome, Mirtha.
Thank you, Laura. Happy to be here today. So let me try and share this and hope that it's gonna happen. Presentation mode, everyone can see.
Looks good.
All right, great. Oh, sorry. Let me go back. Is it still on presentation mode for everyone?
No, we're
Oh gosh,
off
I'm
of full
sorry.
screen. So
Okay. I'm trying to get my notes in as well. This is why. So maybe can everyone see? Is it presenter mode? Can you see my notes, or is it the whole only the slides?
we can see all the slides that way, but just do whatever works for you. I think we can
No,
zoom
that's
in
okay. I'm
or
just gonna
just
do the
review.
slideshow without the notes, and it's fine.
Okay.
All right. So thank you for being here tonight, everyone. So I'm here with Loka, and I'm calling this presentation Cultivating Inner Resilience as Environmental Action. These are pictures of me at home. So I am from the Yucatan Peninsula, or my family's from the Yucatan Peninsula. I was born there. I grew up in Milwaukee. These are some pictures of, the mangroves, and I love the little picture on the bottom left that says, "Don't be a little pig, don't throw garbage in the mangroves." The Climate Crowd, World Wildlife Fund had a really great Mexican summary report on the northern Yucatan and the mangroves, and just changes in weather and climate there. So if you all see on the screen that little number 3, Tzilam de Bravo, that's where my grandmother's from, and paternally. And so as you can see on the right, changes in weather and climate have been drastically reported from the community across the coast. And the climate impacts are pretty severe along not just the biodiversity, but also the changing livelihoods and just the communities of the area. So thank you, Laura, for introducing Loka. As she mentioned, Loka is based at UW-Madison, and our vision is that inner community and planetary resilience are interdependent, and we cannot achieve any of these without working on the other two. Loka was formed by my director, Tequila Chungiapa. She's right there. So she used to work at World Wildlife Fund, and she created a program there coming from knowing that 85% of people in the world follow a spiritual faith. And 80% of biodiversity is in indigenous managed lands today. So because of this belief system, faiths constitute the world's third largest category of financial investors. The Catholic Church is the third wealthiest property owner in the world. And we know the Pope had a Laudato Deum recently, in which he has doubled down and really talked a lot about human-caused climate change and the planetary crisis in which we find ourselves today. However, faith leaders aren't usually in discussions when you think about the climate crisis. You don't really think about faith communities coming together. It's more, the other NGOs, the conservationists, the scientists, and the biologists and all that, which is incredible. But again, if 85% of people in the world follow a spiritual faith, we should tap into that, right? And try and work together and create those dialogues. So that said, Loka's activity streams are capacity building, research and resource development, and public engagement and outreach. And I will go into a couple of examples of how we do that. One of our flagship programs that we're working on currently right now is called Creation at the Crossroads. And this program is special and specific because I mentioned earlier how the Pope and the Catholic faith, how there's a commitment there to what's going on with the environmental crisis and the planetary crisis as a whole. But evangelical Christians as a group are a group that haven't really been involved in these conversations. And when you think about them, and when we think about the polarization of the United States, particularly right now around Christianity and politics and evangelicals in general, this is something that we thought was incredibly important to bridge. And as you can see here, one of our partners on this program, we need people to recognize that evangelicals are not a myth, and there is a lot of work being done in this community at certain levels. And so we have a program. It's called Creation at the Crossroads. And we bring together small groups of pastors from across the country, the United States, here in Middleton, Wisconsin, and Madison, Wisconsin, a couple virtually before. We just had our 5th convening last month. It was our 3rd in person. We had 17 pastors join from Texas, Florida, Indiana, California, here in Wisconsin. And cohort members are presented with opportunities to talk to scientists at UW-Madison. So Loka is that bridge, right? We had Dr. Paul Robbins, the dean of the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies. We had Michael Notaro, who is at the climate office at Nelson Institute. And Dr. Susan Davidson, who came to present about pollution and human health and climate change generally and human health. So the pastors heard from them. They also heard theology on creation care presentations, and they were able to discuss this. They were able to talk about science communication, politics, and the feelings around political, especially in an election year, and how that affects their congregations and their conversations around climate change, and then project development and ideas for how they can communicate with their churches, but then also put projects into place to mitigate some of these in their communities. And cohort members continue to meet in a pilot program called Churches of Restoration. Loka hosted a lot of their convenings before to sort of keep their community going and sort of have that dialogue continuing beyond the in-person gathering. It is a very successful program, and this year going forward, we're going to take a pause on the gatherings, but we're trying to put together sort of an evaluation of how we've been doing, and we're really excited about it. Sacred Wisdom, Sacred Earth is one of the capacity building that we do with Indigenous knowledge holders. And so in 2021, there was an online convening with Indigenous peoples and communities, and they held teachings. And out of that, Loka committed from the partners, Loka committed to producing a documentary with the tribes here in Wisconsin. And if we have enough time at the end, I will show the trailer. It's really awesome. Resilience in the Anthropocene is the research arm of the program. We held a summit last August 2023 in which we had over 40 speakers, scientists, psychologists, therapists, practitioners, Indigenous knowledge holders that came together, and we had a 3-day online convening. We had over 1,200 people online from 50 different countries. And from that summit, we launched a course just this summer. More than 700 people have signed up. It is Resilience in the Anthropocene, and I will go into further detail because that is my offering to you all tonight. So these are some of the speakers that we had at the summit last year. And we use the word resilience because, as you can see, across psychology, sociology, and ecology, it really is the capacity of ourselves, of our minds, of an ecosystem to respond to disturbances and resisting that damage and trying to recover in a way. And particularly, we at Loka, our research is looking at emotions and emotional granularity surrounding these words. So eco-anxiety, climate distress, solastalgia, and other emotions that we feel, right? These are just some of those namings and those new words for what people are feeling nowadays and have been feeling. And we know that 55% of Americans find climate change to be a significant source of stress, but this doesn't affect everyone across the whole, equally. I mean, 84% of children and young adults are worried worldwide about climate change, right? And disproportionately, we know that Black and Indigenous, other people of color, economically disadvantaged, older adults, disabilities, outdoor workers, Indigenous peoples, Global South are disproportionately impacted by climate change. So I would like, if this works again, this whole sharing the screen, I shouldn't have done it. If folks can scan this and/or go to slido.com, and I will give you all the number in a second, because now I'm going to stop share real quick to reshare on the internet. I want to do a little exercise. So all right. If you all could go to slido.com. That's SLIDO.com. And put in the number 9466416, and I'm going to put it in the chat here as well. Thank you, Laura. All right, that's the number. And just put in what emotions rise to the top when you think about the ecological and our climate crisis. Personally. Any words, any emotions, what rises to the top when you think about the environment? Sadness. Anger. Frustration. Sorrow. Disconnection from Mother Earth and one another. They're really good. Grief. Yeah.
Sorry, I can't remember. Where do I enter it?
Oh, I'm so sorry. So if you go to slido.com.
I got that and I got it all in, but I don't see where to enter.
Oh, there should,
I know on my phone I had to scroll down, like I saw the little words and then I scrolled down and it said add response.
Thanks, Laura.
Okay, so hopefully
Thanks.
that
Oh,
works.
well, mine doesn't, but I can tell you fear.
Fear. Yes, good. Yes, of course, everyone, if anyone wants to, say it out loud as well. So I'll stop sharing that. And so getting back to, sorry, let me get back to sharing my screen. What that shows us is that we're not alone, right? Look around. Our emotions are valid. They're a rational response to the crisis we're facing, and we're part of this community, and the community is the solution. And so one of the things that Loka has been working on, as I share my screen, okay, is this course that launched in the summer, so barely 3 months ago. We did this on Wisconsin X, which is UW-Madison's platform on edX, and it's called The Psychology of Deep Resilience. It's a certificate program. It's available. There's 4 courses that make it up online. It's self-paced. You have 12 weeks to complete it. It's available in 70+ countries, only in English, unfortunately at the moment. And I'm very happy if you don't aren't able to sort of scan this right now to share this information with everyone afterwards via Laura. But so we created this course. These are examples of what's included in the modules. And the amazing part about it is that as part of the course program as well, we have a contemplative practices library. Because we know that when we're feeling on these kinds of things, there are certain things that we can do to try to feel better psychologically, right? So somatics, mindfulness, nature-based practices, and other kinds of spiritual practices that can help us with those emotions that we all just put together, that we all just saw, that we're all feeling. So another good way to keep up with our work is to sign up for our newsletter. Again, if you're not able to scan this at the time, I'll send it out with Laura. We have a newsletter going out tomorrow. Actually, there's more than 3,000 people signed up for it. And tomorrow we're going to be highlighting a Maya community leader from the Yucatan that we interviewed about their work in climate mitigation in the peninsula. And we're also on social media. Glad to share all of these links out after the presentation. And of course, all this information and more can also be found on our website at lokainitiative.org and my email as well. So again, all of these I'm happy to share out, and I hope I didn't go over time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Samantha. You did not go over time. So yeah, did you want to share the trailer for the documentary? Because I
That
think
would
we
be
can
awesome. Yeah, I
have
would love to share the trailer now that let me just X out of all of these things. And apologies for the tech issues, but all right. Can everyone see this YouTube? Now,
Yes.
unfortunately, what I've noticed with YouTube is if I share the full screen, the audio goes away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make it as big as possible. And then everyone can see it this way.
Long ago, our ancestors, they knew how to live with the land and understand it. And that's the kind of things that we're trying to get back to help our people heal.
Being people of the land, we are unlike other people who have come to make their homes here, and that is our strength. We have to stand on that firm cultural and spiritual foundation that we as Anishinaabe people are blessed to receive.
We're talking about our grandmother, the earth. The veins in her body are representative of our blood. That's her vital organs, is these lakes, rivers, and streams.
We are the earth. Those plants are the earth. We are them, they are us. And that relationship is there.
Those are the teachers, right? Those are the ones that show us and help us to understand our lives.
You want to know what it means to be who you are, be in the place to hear them. It's the collection of pieces that lead us back to ourselves. We can choose to keep going down the path of destruction, and we know where that's going to lead. Or humanity can make a different choice. Begin to go back to our natural laws, go back to the ways that our indigenous people have always held on to and want to share.
When you're given that wisdom, the intent is that you then pass that on.
As a person, you have all of the knowledge, you can feel it in your blood memories. You know how to help yourself, help your community, help the earth. We have the power to do that now.
So we're very excited about, thank you. Yes, we're so excited about this. We are doing that in partnership with a local Madison filmmaker called Brave Bird. They are Indigenous and woman-owned. They're incredible, and we are hoping to have the film completed in April, and it will be showing in Madison soon, aka so next year. And we're really, for example, with Laura at Catholic Multicultural Center, we really want to show it there and multiple other places as well. So really excited.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mirta, for that presentation and telling us more about the Loka Initiative and maybe getting us to think in a little bit of a different way of how to address climate change. It's a very multifaceted approach, and we need to come at it from all angles. And yeah, for those of you in the Madison area, which I think is most of you, we hopefully will be showing that documentary next spring. So we'll definitely share information about that when the time comes.
Yes, thanks, Laura. And then, about the course as well, it is, I'm happy to, share that link out with Laura to share it out. And if you want to sign up, and join the many hundreds. There, you have to sign up per course. So it's a strange little thing on edX. If you click on the course, it asks you to pay. If you saw how it was divided into 4 sort of courses, you have to sign up for each of them separately, and then that way you are able to access for free. But I'm happy to help anyone through, because the course itself is very, we developed it with a very intersectional, very sort of holistic approach, we hope, to be helpful and to help with these emotions and the research as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And yeah, Mirta, if you send me those links, I plan to send a follow-up email to everyone probably on Friday, so I can share all that information so you have it. All right, moving right along. Our final presentation of the evening will be given by Catherine Woodward of the Ceiba Foundation for Tropical Conservation in Ecuador. Ceiba works to connect tropical nature and sustainable livelihoods through habitat conservation and environmental education. They protect rare and endangered plants and animals and bolster the value that tropical ecosystems provide to rural communities. Their strategy is to establish locally operated nature reserves, promote public education, sponsor scientific research, promote and support community-based sustainability. They emphasize projects which promote the empowerment of local landowners and communities, encourage them to actively participate in the sustainable management of their land. So welcome, Catherine.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Again, my name is Catherine Woodward. I'm an ecologist by training, and I'm currently the president of the Ceiba Foundation for Tropical Conservation. We're a small nonprofit organization based in Madison, Wisconsin. And today I wanted to talk to you about, let me share my screen actually before we get going here. Put my presentation up for you guys. Let's see. Okay, is everyone able to see that? Get rid of the floating controls so I don't have them in the way. Okay, that should work.
Looks good.
Great. So today I want to talk to you about how we are embracing the concept of summa causae, which to address the climate change impacts in the Americas and specifically in Ecuador. Summa causae is a Quechua phrase that translates vaguely into living in harmony with nature. I'm going to echo quite a bit of what Katie touched upon in her talk, and also I agree with Mirta that there are a lot of solutions out there, but it's going to take everyone of all cultural and spiritual backgrounds to address the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis. So I'll be touching on those concepts. So a little just background about Ceiba I'm going to start with, although thank you. You did a nice job introducing us, Laura. I'll reiterate a little bit about what Ceiba does and go on to what we're doing to address climate change issues in coastal Ecuador. The Ceiba Foundation is named after this majestic tropical tree that you see on the screen. It is called ceibo in Spanish. You may have also know it as the kapok tree and the silk cotton tree. We chose that as our name because the ceiba really symbolizes humans' reverence for nature. People don't cut it down. They leave it in pastures even, and it's revered, and it supports a lot of biodiversity as well. Our mission is to connect tropical nature and sustainable livelihoods through habitat conservation and education. And our work is guided by several core values, including the belief that nature has value, and we try to illuminate the value of that nature, both intrinsic and instrumental, in the people with whom we work. Most people have an innate kind of sense of the value of nature, and nurturing that is important, I think, to advance some of these solutions. We also promote strategies to protect and restore ecosystems while improving human well-being, to strive for more sustainable livelihoods. And we embrace social justice. We believe people of all ages, genders, and races should have equal access to opportunity, to knowledge, and to a healthy environment. And to knowledge, believing that information empowers people to act in sustainable ways. A lot of the reasons that people do things a certain way is not because they don't care or they don't value certain things. It's because they don't have necessarily the opportunity to obtain the knowledge they need to do things differently. And last, we really work on a foundation of trust. Stimulating positive change relies on building trust across cultures, across communities, between stakeholders and external players, and within communities as well. So we focus a lot in Ecuador right now, mostly in Ecuador, where we promote habitat conservation. We're especially working in cloud forests and tropical dry forests. These are two ecosystems that have received relatively less attention than rainforests, which are sort of, at least in the tropics anyway, are a bit more well researched and well supported in terms of their conservation. Oops, I can't move forward for some reason. We also support environmental education for all types of people, from Ecuadorian school children like those pictured here, seeing monkeys for the very first time in the forest in their backyards, to teachers and farmers and the general public. And we also offer study abroad programs for U.S. college students, as well as educational travel for people like yourselves to go and visit these places. And a lot of our work, we really try to base our work in scientific evidence. We don't only do our own ecological research, but we try to facilitate the research of scientists in Ecuador and students in Ecuador and around the world at the forest reserves that we work with and that we seek to protect. And sort of last but not least, we recognize that conservation of biodiversity is is likely to be more effective when it's led by and benefits local communities. So we have several ongoing projects to support grassroots initiatives that I'll talk some of which I'll talk about today. So this photo here is a group of seamstresses and tailors from the community of Tubuga in coastal Ecuador. They are sewing reusable shopping bags. They also make the local football, soccer uniforms and all school uniforms, all sorts of things. But they're now making reusable shopping bags to try to replace the plastic bags that are littering the roads and beaches in the area. So I'll talk now, that's sort of an overview of what we've sort of been doing, but I'll talk now about a couple of ways that we're trying to address climate change through this idea of summa causae, living in harmony with nature in coastal Ecuador. And we're doing a lot of different things that I won't have time to go over everything, but the two things I want to focus on today are the setting up of conservation and sustainable use areas, as well as the Seeds of Sustainability Fund, which is aimed at supporting local initiatives. So you might wonder why we focus on coastal Ecuador. Well, it's one of the top 10 most biodiverse countries in the world, and generally tropical forests harbor the disproportionate amount of biodiversity compared to the amount of land they cover on the planet. They're also huge storehouses of carbon. The biodiversity of coastal Ecuador in particular is really highly threatened. There are a lot of species endemic to that area that don't occur anywhere else on Earth. And there's only overall in coastal Ecuador, only about 2% of this semi-deciduous, seasonally dry tropical forest remaining. So lots of threat there for the biodiversity. The region also suffers still from very high rates of poverty. It's very rural. Agriculture is the main economic activity in the region, and also the greatest cause of deforestation, of course. And third, the region is very vulnerable to the impacts of climate change for reasons I will explain shortly. If you look at the rainfall for sort of an area that's right smack dab in the middle kind of the coast, there's this really prolonged dry season that can last 6 months or more. And unfortunately, climate change has made these dry seasons longer, stronger, and less predictable. So the increasing unpredictability of rainfall makes coastal communities especially vulnerable to climate change. And most coastal communities, people we talk to in that area, will identify water as one of their top concerns, the access and availability of fresh water. And there are a couple of factors I want you to understand that exacerbate this vulnerability and really plays into how we can help people adapt and mitigate the impacts of climate change. So the first is shown here on this left map of Ecuador, and it illustrates how the coast of Ecuador is one of the few places in the country that receives no rain from the Andes. So there's this coastal mountain chain that kind of runs along here, and it prevents rainfall that would be draining westward from the Andes to actually reach the coastal regions. So this map, if you can see here in this area here, most of the watersheds are smaller and local rainfall basins, and they're not connected at all to the Andes. So why is this important? Well, it means the water supply depends on local rainfall. In the rainy season, the rivers have water, but so you can see that kind of on the right here, but when the rainfall stops, many of the rivers will dry up completely. And so this presents a vulnerability, of course, but it also presents an opportunity because it means that local land management, things you can do locally, can have a huge impact on both the quantity of the water people are getting and the quality of it that's available for communities living there. So the second factor that makes this region so vulnerable is that in the past multiple decades, 50, 70 years or so, fairly recent actually, this region has suffered extreme deforestation. I don't know how much you know about how forests affect the carbon cycle and the water cycle, but I can give you a really brief overview in case you're rusty. That basically, when you have an intact forest, forests that are growing and healthy are taking up a lot of CO2, and they also hold or store a lot of carbon in their biomass. And likewise, a forest will, with its fluffy soil, with rich in organic matter and leaf litter underneath, will have relatively high infiltration of rainfall with relatively low runoff. The trees and the roots block the runoff into streams. And that results in this kind of sponge-like quality where there's this slow recharge of streams and aquifers, giving a more stable and consistent stream flow. But when you cut those forests down, as happened, remember I said only 2% of the forest remains in some of these areas. You first of all, when you destroy the trees and replace them with pasture, which is unfortunately one of the principal land uses, but also monoculture croplands, all that excess biomass that's burned or rots away is released into the atmosphere as CO2. And then the environment you've left behind is relatively low biomass, takes up a lot less CO2 from the atmosphere. So you're just getting you're exacerbating basically the climate change CO2 emissions by changing these land uses from forest to non-forest cropland. And then the other problem, of course, is that when you've cut down the forest and the roots die away and the soil might get compacted by cows and whatever, the rainfall that falls no longer infiltrates as much, but a lot of it just tends to run right off into streams, especially during heavy rainfall events. So ironically, you wind up overall having streams with less water in the system, but when it does rain, you have a higher flood risk. So you have sort of this incredible higher risk of disasters and greater vulnerability with more prolonged drought. So the growing water shortages and the unpredictability there is, of course, a major problem for people living in the region. And many people do not have municipal, like piped in water supplies. So they still rely directly on rivers for all of their water needs. So this is changing gradually. Pandemic actually, interestingly, changed a lot of it quite a bit, but still a lot of these rural communities are doing their laundry in the rivers. They're bathing in the rivers. They use river water. They collect river water for irrigation and even for drinking. In general, people have access to gas to boil water, but there are also cases where people are drinking water directly from the rivers without proper sanitation. And they also, unfortunately, there are many cases, there's a lot of livestock and they're in very close proximity to these river systems. Livestock needs to cool off, it needs to drink, and in many cases, the livestock enters the rivers directly. So as we all know, I mean, cows and pigs are going to be pooping in the rivers, or their feces are near the riverbanks and will wash into the rivers. And so that leads to major water quality issues, both from the nutrient loading, but also from the potential pathogens or parasites that are entering the water and causing human health risk. And we actually did some research into the E. coli contamination. E. coli is in all warm-blooded animals' feces, is largely E. coli, but a lot of its presence detects fecal presence, and so it can be an indicator for other pathogens. And it also itself can cause illness in certain cases. So we just looked at E. coli at the headwaters of the rivers, or to the blue bars, and versus the mouth where they were near where it dumped out into the ocean there along the coast. And it was clear that these rivers were picking up E. coli from the pastures and towns that they were moving through as they encountered areas with dense livestock. We also compared the E. coli levels in the streams within these protected forest areas versus in non-protected areas, and found that forests actually did play an important role in filtering out contaminants, and probably just because they just didn't have large livestock populations and having a lot less of this E. coli there. So it's not just climate change. The way humans are managing land is not just causing climate change impacts, but is also affecting water supplies, human health, and ultimately the economy of a lot of these communities. So What is Ceiba doing to help? Well, we've been collaborating at all levels, from provincial and local governments, cantones, provincia, counties, provinces, as well as the national government, and down to communities and individual landowners as well. And as the government has continued to recognize the urgency of the climate crisis and also try to meet their obligations for the nationally determined contributions of reducing carbon emissions, we've been collaborating with cantones, which are pictured here in the coast of Ecuador, to set up what are known as conservation and sustainable use areas, or Área de Conservación y Uso Sostenible. I'm just going to call them ACUS. That's the acronym for that. And these are basically county level ordinances that use mapping data we've helped them compile to basically identify the remaining forests, identify important water sources, and try to zone areas for sustainable land use. And also provide a legal framework for implementing benefits to landowners who protect forest, and also mandate that laws that actually are already in place in the country but aren't being implemented are implemented to protect water sources. So you notice this area, here are 4 counties. The green dots or the green blobs are what's left of the forest here. The whole county is actually much bigger than the ACUS itself. The ACUS doesn't comprise the whole county, and then the province there is Manabí. So in the ACUS itself, there's actually almost half of it is still forest. So it represents a wonderful opportunity to use to protect remaining forest. So this property tax exoneration, this protection of water resources, how are we achieving that? Well, there's multiple ways of going, getting these solutions in place. One way that Ceiba has been helping is to help landowners, support landowners basically in fencing their livestock away from streams, keeping the cows out of the streams. And so it's not just water quantity. If there's only a little water left, you need that water to be as good as possible. So this helps keep the water cleaner, and it also keeps the riversides from being trampled by cows and destroying the vegetation. But of course, cows need to drink, and other livestock needs to drink just like we do. And so we've also been providing small grants to landowners so they can install these cattle troughs that still rely on river water, but the cows drink it. It has a float. The water doesn't go back to the stream. If it does, it filters through the soil before it does. So it keeps those cows out of those waterways again, so they're not contaminating the water. And then once the cows are out of the river, we need to restore the streamside vegetation and do some reforestation. So many of the communities are involved in restoring the streamside vegetation. You can see plants being carried by people and put along the stream sides. We also encourage people to reforest in areas that are not necessarily along streams, including to incorporate trees into agricultural systems. As I think it was Katie that mentioned, planting trees has enormous impacts in absorbing carbon dioxide. So again, reforestation is something that can't be done. A lot of people just take for granted that somehow there's this enormous supply of native tree seedlings somewhere. And in fact, the shortage of native tree seedlings is one of the biggest barriers to getting reforestation to actually happen. It takes about 400 trees just to reforest a single acre of land. So if you're talking about thousands of acres, it quickly adds up to millions of trees. And so one of the big projects we were doing that was supported in part by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service actually was to provide some support both in the forms of funding for materials. A lot of these rural municipalities just don't have the funds to create large-scale tree nurseries. So we provided support in the form of equipment, but also in the form of training to help ramp up the production of native tree species. So there's a lot of different stakeholders in the ACUS. It encompasses agricultural lands, forest lands, and while it doesn't encompass the whole county, there are still many, many communities involved, many, many people involved. And there's so many people that have their own great ideas that have been doing things traditionally for a very long time. In many cases, they've been marginalized or sidelined against the more industrial approaches to agriculture, for example. But there are lots of people that have great ideas to become more sustainable in their own lives or to bring back or recover some of these more traditional ways of managing land. So we established the Seeds of Sustainability Fund. It's completely publicly funded through donations. And it's basically out there to support these grassroots initiatives that support like conservation projects or adoption of deforestation-free or climate-friendly business practices. This is Narcisa Puertas here on her farm. She grows shade cacao and makes a variety of organic products from not only shade cacao, but she also grows curcuma, which is turmeric, and other products that are sort of rooted in some of the cultural knowledge of medicinal plants too that the community has. And she also is supplementing her income by making her farm an agro-tourism destination. So this is actually a student group that we took there. So we've supported a variety of initiatives. This is just one example, everything from sea turtle nest protection to environmental education initiatives and things like that, both in coastal Ecuador and elsewhere. But the Seeds of Sustainability grant are sort of trying to support the people that embrace this idea of summa causae, that living in harmony with nature is a way forward. So I just want to end also a little bit more about the importance of promoting biodiversity there. Biodiversity sustains the human systems humans rely on, and biodiversity is heavily threatened in this area. So we are also working, this is a close-up of part of the ACUS. Basically, this is a satellite image in which the darker green polygons that are surrounded by orange are the remaining forest patches. There's no forest out here at all anymore. But you can see this coastal chain of forest patches that are left. The white is clouds. Basically, all the other green is just agricultural land. And you can see that the fragments of forest that are left are separated from each other because of deforestation on the landscape, meaning that animals like monkeys and amphibians and birds and ocelots may have a really hard time moving in this landscape just generally because of habitat loss, because of their habitat being so fragmented. And animals need to move. They need to find water. They need to find mates. They need to find food, especially in highly seasonal climates. And the difficulty of moving becomes even more pronounced when, you have this bigger issue of climate change that can actually force animals to migrate or to need to shift their ranges entirely to occupy suitable habitat. So we are working with landowners to protect forests, and this is Lalo Lure and his daughter, Mariela. They own and operate the Bosque Seco Lalo Lure, and through harnessing the donations and grants, we've helped them to establish the reserve and manage the reserve into a destination. Now they have a biological station where researchers can come, where student groups can come. And so they've really made it a local hotspot for ecological activity and environmental education. They are one example, but what effect is all this having? Obviously, that's something we need to know. And so we have a lot of different benchmarks and indicators we look at that are socioeconomic and attitudes and things like that. But we also do some citizen science. I'll just touch on a few. This is a community, some teachers actually learning to monitor water quality in the streams. And we hope that this will not only show this project produced the data you saw earlier with the E. coli and the E. coli levels, but also to be able to teach their own students and monitor changes that occur with these improved land uses. And then I'll share this awesome image. We're also this video. This is a little anteater mama and her baby. We are using camera traps to look at how the forest is protecting wildlife and if animals are moving through areas that are reforested, areas that are restored. how well is that supporting biodiversity? And here's just one more fun video I'll end up on of an ocelot that was curious about the camera during the daytime. Kind of neat videos here of the wildlife. So that's pretty much it. There are a few ways that you could get involved. We always, especially we'd love to have Madison community become involved in what we do here. You can, of course, visit our projects in Ecuador. We take volunteers and interns. You could travel with us on our educational tours. You can subscribe to our newsletter. I wasn't as up to date as Mirta was in putting a QR code up there. I probably should have, but if you go to ceiba.org, you can find our subscription, our place to subscribe. You can also follow us on social media at Ceiba Foundation. And you can travel with us. We have a couple of different opportunities coming up in 2024. We have a journey to Galapagos and explore the Amazon trip that is available at ceiba.org/edutours if you want to get involved. And as I said before, all our work relies on public donations. And so we also are happy to accept your support. And I really thank you for having me today.
Great. Thank you so much, Catherine, for sharing that information about the incredible work that Ceiba is doing, both with the environments of coastal Ecuador and the communities that live there. So now that we've had a chance to hear from these three awesome presenters with us tonight, we want to leave our remaining time tonight to hear from the audience, your questions, your thoughts, and yeah, like let's take advantage of being able to continue learning from these three great agencies. And to start us off, I'm going to call out Dr. Elia Armakanki, who had presented at a past event like this. So I'm going to ask her to share a few words and get our Q&A started.
First of all, thank you very much to Catholic Multicultural Center that organized this kind of events towards the climate change. Thank you, especially Laura Green and Antonio Quintanilla. Second, and I would like to highlight the wonderful presentation of each of you. You did a wonderful job raising up consciousness about the impact of the pollution in the climate change, which is important. Specifically in Peru, we have a problem with the mining. The mining is the biggest polluted for our waters and the land and everything. And because we have a government, well, actually illegal government, we say, some of the indigenous peoples. I'm indigenous, Peruvian indigenous from Peru. And we don't recognize her because she is not doing anything about regulating the mining, and especially the mining is in the Andean parts of Peru. And third, I would like to underline each of you for bringing the importance of the native indigenous people in each part. I believe that they are the first who take care of the really of nature. And I will say also that they are the first organic farmers of their own, and we can learn a lot from each of the part for instance, here from Native American, from United States, from indigenous from Ecuador and Peru and so forth, and so forth. For instance, I have a question about to Catherine about Ecuador. Here, do you know or do you coordinate with the Otavalo people, Ecuadorian people here in Madison. It is a big population of Ecuadorian that works selling the goods, like especially our crafts, but also some of them work in the agriculture or in the with dairy, with cows and so forth. They are a big number of Ecuadorian, and I'm sure that they will be interested in knowing that you are working so nicely in Ecuador. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just to answer that question first about mining, that we have that same problem in the Andean region. I was focusing on the coastal areas, but we also work with landowners in the Andean region to protect forest. And mining is just this huge, they plunk mines down on forests that are already protected. It's a huge threat, but that just underscores how solutions really need to be tailored to the local circumstances and what the powers that be locally are and what the threats are locally. As far as the Otavaleños here in Madison, I'm aware that there's a big group of them, and amazingly, perhaps embarrassingly, we don't really work with them very much. We do not work in the Otavalo region of Ecuador. We do not have currently any projects there. However, I know that Wisconsin Without Borders, and some maybe Mirta might even be familiar with some of these folks. Lori Dupree Brown, Susan Webster, Janet Niewold, and others that had worked in a project called Wisconsin Without Borders that worked quite a bit with women's groups in Cotacachi and Otavalo on handicrafts and bringing those into back to Madison actually to be sold. So I think there was a connection there that I was more involved in through my position at UW. But thank you for suggesting that. That's a great idea. I'd like to get
Thank you.
talk to them.
I can write you, perhaps give you some names and so forth.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's thanks, Catherine, for sure. There's also a really cool youth group in Madison. It's called the Quichua Collective. I'm sure maybe some of you have heard about it. And I put the link in the chat here. They do a lot of sort of cultural and immersion and indigenous knowledge holding and just Ecuadorian community building in the Madison area, in Wisconsin, I think.
Thank you, Mirta. I'll definitely love to meet with them.
Yeah.
All right. What other questions, thoughts do people have for our panelists? Well, maybe people are still thinking. I have a question that's kind of just for fun. For each of you, like if we could travel to your locations and or the communities or affiliates you work with, what is one thing you would be most excited to show us?
I went first last time, but I'm happy to share. So I already know what it is.
Go for it.
I would be really excited to show you some of the incredible local leaders have you meet some of the local people who are leading the initiatives that have developed in the region where we're working right now. Everything we do is being led by Ecuadorians who are just committed as we are as this sort of outside NGO, more committed because it's their land, it's their culture, it's their property, it's their livelihoods. And I would want you to meet and share ideas and excitement with them.
Great.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, for Catherine, I want to ask you about Ceiba Foundation. Is it only for Ecuador, or do you have any activities or program also in Madison? Because maybe I also heard that you based in Madison, right? And I also see your website, and there are also another opportunity to become internship, right? To become intern. And if we apply, what do you mean for a credit and non-credit? Maybe I don't understand it. Yeah. And for Mirta, I also want to ask you about, is there any program for youth maybe in medicine? That's all. Thank you very much.
Okay, just quickly. So it's sort of an accident that we're Madison based because I got my PhD here at UW-Madison, and that's around the time that me and my colleagues were sort of thinking about how much we wanted to try to do good in the world and by forming a charity. So that's why we're here, but that's been fortuitous because I'm able to have partnered with UW-Madison on a lot of study abroad and internship opportunities, as you pointed out. Interns can go down at any time of year and work on various projects that we have ongoing. It depends a little bit on their language skills, what internships are most appropriate for different people's interests. But the 4-credit internship is a summer 8-week 6-credit internship that you can get through the UW Study Abroad office. And so I'm happy to talk to anybody about that. You can just email me. I put my email in the chat. We do work in so we used to, in sort of our embracing of social justice, we're starting to move away from Ceiba being the entity that manages projects, and instead, there's only a limited number of people and time that we can do that, and instead help turn our sites toward facilitating the amazing people that have great ideas all over the world in doing their own projects in their own countries. So we have the Seeds of Sustainability Fund is actually any organization, association, nonprofit, or even an individual in certain instances from any tropical country can apply to receive a Seeds of Sustainability Fund. As long as it fits sort of within the general guidelines of our mission. So in that regard, yes, we do work in other countries, but not directly. And we do have some connections with Belize as well.
I have a question for Kathy. Thank you very much for the presentation on Monteverde. I had been in Costa Rica for the first time last year, and I am going to go again to Costa Rica next year. Could you tell me what is the best or the months that best to visit Monteverde?
The best reason to visit Monteverde, or the best
months and what reasons probably to see your project there, but also the month, probably is rainy or something like that.
Right now it's extremely rainy. And just as Catherine was saying, now the rains and the weather is much less predictable than it used to be. High season here for tourism is really January through April, and maybe July as well. That's when the weather tends to be less rainy and people prefer not to be here in the rain. But all year round the animals are here, and you'll be able to visit the cloud forest. When I was thinking about what to answer Laura's question, I was thinking the cloud forest, just going into the cloud forest, and everything that Catherine was saying about the absorption of water and about the biodiversity is very applicable where we are as well.
Thank you very much.
To also answer Laura's question, but to also answer Irene's question earlier. So I think that the two most exciting projects for Loka, I would say, is the creation of the Crossroads one is very interesting, right? Because it's I feel a very open project, a project that's very unique in creating those dialogues and in, you know, sort of bridging the science and the faith aspect and just bringing those two together. It's a very exciting project for us. And of course, the documentary. That's where we're really, really excited to start being able to share out in the community in Madison. Not just in Madison, you know, we're also trying to figure out funding wise, how we can bring it, how we can pay for maybe Spanish translation subtitles, bring it to Latin American partners and partner with as many orgs as we can to show it. But for Irene's question, we don't work directly with youth. There are different organizations that we have come across in our work. For example, there is a group in the Menominee Reservation called Medicine Fish that does incredible work with their youth. But one place that I thought would be interesting or helpful to share that does a lot of local work in Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, is called Faith in Place. They have these things called green teams, and I put their website on the chat and also the green team directory. And you can see like they have different, and that's youth inclusive, right? It's with different, many different denominations. It's cross-denominational. And they also have a tree canopy community grant going on. I put the link in there as well. They have tree planting grants that up to $30,000 available to plant trees either at your house of worship, or it doesn't have to be it can be just a community organization. And so I put the link there for the application, the opportunity, in case if anyone on the call who was interested in a tree planting grant for their community here locally in Wisconsin or Illinois or Indiana. So thanks.
Thank you. Well, I see that we are almost at our time. As people are able and willing, we can hang out for a few more minutes if people want to keep asking questions. But just want to take this moment to offer a big thank you to our three presenters. Thank you, Katie, Mirtha, and Catherine, for sharing your time and knowledge with us tonight. We really appreciate it, and I think it's safe to say that we'll all leave feeling more inspired and empowered to do what we can for our climate, which affects everyone around the world. So yeah, like however we can, let's take a moment for some digital applause for our presenters. So yay! Thank you so much.
I would like to, sorry, Laura, echoing Kathy's and everybody, I would like to ask, we need to choose our leaders. It's very important for to defend to make aware of the climate change and so forth. And I agree that Kamala Harris is the one. The other guy doesn't even mention anything. And we have to do our job to get people to vote. Thank you.
Wisconsin might decide this election.
I also want to give a big thanks to the presenters. It was wonderful. There's a lot of information that we got today. Also, I want to thank Laura because I think she did really well with the presentations and doing all this research. It takes time for finding presenters, and so I didn't much to help her. I'm her co-worker, and we do the environmental things together. But she is. I'm grateful that she is being able to put together all these things. I'm gonna have to leave because I have a phone call from El Salvador right now that my mom is holding. But thank you everyone for coming to this presentation. I hope we can see you in the future again.
Yeah, thank you, Antonio. I know
Welcome. Thank you.
you did a lot of work behind the scenes, so thank you so much. Maybe I think whoever's in charge of our recording, maybe now's a good time to end the recording. And yeah, we'll still hang out for a few more minutes if anyone has any final thoughts.